Tonight, for the first time, the three frontrunners in the race for Louisiana governor will share a stage. The face-off is at the Union Theater on the campus of Louisiana State University, just miles from where one of them will lead the state for the next 4 years. Democrat John Bel Edwards shocked the political world with his win in 2015.
The people of Louisiana want to keep moving forward.
Two Republicans want to send Edwards packing from the governor's mansion. Congressman Ralph Abraham is in his third term on Capitol Hill.
From day one, we will attack the budget.
And businessman Eddie Risponse, who founded what is now one of the largest engineering and construction companies in the country.
And we need someone with serious business skills, someone that knows what a big budget is.
Listen tonight for the differences in how they stand on key issues like taxes, health care, and education. The first governor debate starts now.
You are joining us live from the Student Union Theater on the campus of Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge for the first live televised Louisiana Governor's Debate of 2019. Good evening, I'm Jackie Jovic, evening anchor at NBC6 News in Shreveport. Joining me tonight are anchors Chad Sabady from Baton Rouge. He works at Fox 33, and Fred Childers of Local 33. Our debate tonight is being broadcast statewide on both television and radio. We welcome our viewers and listeners in Shreveport, New Orleans, Monroe, Lake Charles, Lafayette, and Alexandria. And be sure to follow along on social media using our hashtag LAGovDebate.
We would now like to introduce you to the three candidates who have qualified for tonight's debate. The order of introduction has been determined by a random card draw. First, a Republican businessman who founded Industrial Specialty Contractors, Mr. Eddie Risponse. Second, a Democrat currently serving as Louisiana's governor, Mr. John Bel Edwards. Finally, a Republican congressman currently serving his third term representing the 5th District of Louisiana, Mr. Ralph Abraham. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for being with us here tonight. Jackie?
Now we'll go over the rules for tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer questions and 30 seconds for either a follow-up question or rebuttal. You will hear the sound of a bell when your time is up. We will not have opening statements tonight. However, each candidate will get 30 seconds for a closing statement. Our first question comes from Fred.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Gentlemen, we're going to start tonight with a children's health issue, actually a very serious one. The health concerns surrounding e-cigarettes continue to mount. You've probably seen the recent headlines. The latest from the Louisiana Health Department confirms 13 cases of lung problems after patients used e-cigarettes. But across the country, many more people are getting sick, and some have even died. Just this week, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo used executive action to ban sales of most flavored e-cigarettes for the next 90 days. And last week, Michigan became the first state to ban flavored e-cigarettes. If elected governor, would you follow the lead of New York and Michigan in banning flavored e-cigarettes? Why or why not? And we'll start with you, Mr. Risponse. You have 60 seconds to respond.
Well, I'd like to thank y'all for hosting tonight, and I'd also like to thank the audience for being here tonight and viewing our debate tonight. As far as the e-cigarettes, you know, I think that's like cigarettes in general. We should put the warning on those, and we should look at reducing the use of those things. Now, without giving an executive order to do away with them, I don't think I'm prepared to say that tonight. I'm really not. But if the evidence shows that something needs to be done, we need to move forward with that and address it from a health standpoint.
All right, Mr. Risponse, thank you very much. Now to you, Mr. Edwards, would you consider banning e-cigarettes? Why not?
Well, the first thing we would do is sit down with the Secretary of Health look and see what the facts are. I am growing in my concern for e-cigarettes. We know that this is a problem across the country, and it seems like every single day there are more reported cases of young people who, after only a short period of time of smoking these e-cigarettes, the vaping, they're developing very serious, irreversible lung damage. And so I've heard the president say that he is looking at banning the flavoring of the e-cigarettes. I happen to think that that's probably a smart thing to do. I think that's why children are attracted in the first place. We will look at this in Louisiana. I do believe, by the way, that people ought to have to be 21 in order to access the product. So this is something that I'm very interested in. I've already got the Secretary of Health looking into it, and we will take action on it one way or another to limit these e-cigarettes, especially the flavoring of it, in this legislative session coming up next year.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Now to you, Mr. Abraham. Would you be in favor of banning these e-cigarettes?
Well, let's just pause for a minute. I know we're talking mostly young people here, and we have lost 3 LSU students in the last 2 weeks. So thoughts and prayers. We'll put politics aside just briefly for that because it is an important topic. Anything other than oxygen that you put in your lungs is not good. As a physician, I can tell you that. On the e-cigarettes, the vaping, I've talked to the NIH up in Washington, D.C. I've seen the pathology reports, and they do cause damage. Now, it's a personal choice. Certainly, if you're over 21, you smoke a cigarette, I don't recommend it. If you do e-cigarettes, I certainly don't recommend that either. But it is a personal choice. Below 21, I think we need to put the regulations that we have on other cigarettes in place. If the data drives us to a more concrete conclusion, then we follow the data.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abraham. I actually have a follow-up. We're going to get a little more personal with this question. All 3 of you have either children or grandchildren. If you found them using e-cigarettes, what would your reaction be, and what would you say to them? Mr. Risponse, we'll start with you. You have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, I do everything I could to discourage them from using those cigarettes, just like regular cigarettes. Both of them are very harmful to their health. And so I would actually do as best I could to research it, sit down with them, bring them to some experts, and explain to them the hazards of doing that. And that's what I would have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Risponse. Mr. Edwards, what would your reaction be if your children were using e-cigarettes?
Well, it's very similar. In fact, we know e-cigarettes deliver nicotine. I believe that smoking is harmful to your health. I don't believe that e-cigarettes are healthier. They're not a healthier alternative. And so I will do everything that I can to try to convince my children, but also anyone out there, to not smoke. And part of the problem is many people believe it is a safer alternative when in fact it is not. And certainly the flavorings lend themselves to children being attracted, but I would tell them please not to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham, what would your reaction be?
Look, an optic is worth 1,000 words, literally. And even though they're young, my grandchildren, I would show them a lung that has been damaged, not only by the cigarettes, but by the e-cigarettes too. I've seen them, and it's impressive. So they would get the picture literally.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. For our next question, let's go to Jackie.
Thank you, Fred. Now, gentlemen, over the last 4 years, the state has gone from a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit to a multi-million-dollar surplus. Part of the reason for that change was an increase in sales tax 4 years ago. With Louisiana's budget problems no longer an immediate issue, is it time to cut the burden on Louisiana taxpayers? Mr. Edwards, you'll go first. You have 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, that $2 billion budget deficit was the largest in our state's history. We came together and did the hard work necessary by focusing on cuts, savings, and yes, there was revenue supported by a 2/3 vote of a Republican legislature. In fact, more than half the Republicans in the House and the Senate voted for it. We now are running surpluses because the economy is performing better than economists had predicted when they came up with the revenue forecast. And last year, we did cut by $650 million the tax burden on the sales tax. We shouldn't do it by looking back at surpluses because those are automatically necessarily looking backwards. And what we need to do is look forward in the forecast, because the worst thing we can do as a state is go back to a structural budget deficit that we just came out of, that we had for the better part of 10 years, where we're now making investments in education, the first teacher pay raise in a decade, the first net new investment in higher education, including LSU right here, in a decade.
So the sales tax, though, is about a half a cent higher than it was when you took office.
That's correct.
4 years ago. So would you find a way to cut taxes in a different area?
I don't agree that we should cut taxes until we know that we won't go back into a structural budget deficit. We've already reduced the tax burden with respect to the sales tax by $650 million. We did that last year. What we don't want to do is go back to cutting higher education, getting where we can't give our teachers a pay raise, which we did this year for the first time in 10 years. And you do that by looking forward at forecasts, not looking back at a surplus.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham, would you cut taxes? You have 60 seconds.
This governor helped create the deficit. He voted for the majority of Governor Jindal's budgets. And yes, we do have the highest sales tax in the nation, and that's why we do not have the jobs. We have lost jobs more than any other state in the nation, and it's due to taxes, taxes, taxes. I happen to have an op-ed in my pocket that was written by Governor Edwards. And Governor, you said that raising the sales tax will kill the Louisiana economy. Congratulations, Governor. You've killed it, and it's because our taxes are too high.
Mr. Edwards, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, to kill the economy, that's an absurd statement.
No, it's not.
Because the economy is the biggest it has ever been in our state's history, and it is growing at it is growing at the 10th fastest rate in the country right now. Personal income is the highest it has ever been, and unemployment is the lowest in 11 years. That's why we're running a surplus, because the economy is performing better. It is bigger than the economists had predicted when they came up with the forecast. And the idea that we've done anything other than to grow the economy and strengthen it is just false.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. We do want to remind the audience that we want the candidates to have enough time to answer the question, so if you could hold your applause, thank you. Mr. Risponse, would you cut taxes? You have 60 seconds.
Yes, and you know, as a business person, it always amazed me, how do we have a budget deficit when the state law says we have to have a balanced budget? We cannot have an unbalanced budget. So that pauses me to start with. And then why is our budget now $7 billion more than it was 4 years ago? So we have a spending problem as well. How do you have a surplus when you raise taxes? Because it's the taxpayers' money. That's what it is. It's overtaxation. So I would look at it from a totally different standpoint. I'd look at it from a business standpoint. Our budgets would be balanced like they're supposed to be, and then we would figure out why we would have the reserves inside that budget, not come back at the end and say, well, we have a surplus. What happened here is that we told people that we had a deficit, a $1.9 billion deficit, and we had to raise taxes, or we were going to kick elderly out of nursing homes, or we're going to stop LSU football, or we're going to have to cancel TOPS. That's not how you do this.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Risponse. A follow-up to that, we're going to talk about corporate taxes, something that we refer to as ITEB. To make it very simple for our viewers and listeners, it's basically a program that offers tax breaks to companies in Louisiana. Mr. Edwards, under your administration, we saw a change allowing local governing bodies to have the final say over whether or not these companies get tax breaks. So if reelected, would you reconsider giving that power back to the state? You have 30 seconds.
No, because 100% of the taxes being exempted otherwise go to local government. I believe school boards, sheriffs, and parish governments and municipalities ought to have a seat at the table. But we also made sure that it's an 80% exemption over 10 years, not 100%. We also are making sure that we tie it to jobs for the first time in the state of Louisiana. And the aggregate value of all ITEPs that have been approved in capital expenditures is $100 billion, whereas in the last 4 years of the general administration, it was $50 billion. The program is alive and well and working.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham?
On my first hour and my first day as the new governor, I will reverse Governor John Bell's ITEP changes. It has driven businesses out of our state. It's crazy. We are hemorrhaging people. We are hemorrhaging business. This governor, by exemptions, ITEP, has raised corporate taxes by $5 billion. That's why we don't have any jobs. They have left the state.
Thank you, Mr. Risponi. 30 seconds.
Yes, let me say this. You know, the governor, with his executive order, threw it into chaos. We shut down jobs all over this state because industry didn't know where he was going with this. The fact is, we did not sit down with all the parties concerned. Now, what I would do, I would bring them all back together. The locals have to have a say-so in this. We would come up with something that satisfies everyone, and we would put it back in the Department of Economic Development where it belongs. So we'd have predictability and fairness to the job creators so we can keep growing our economy.
Thank you very much. Our next question will come from Chad.
Jackie, thank you very much. Gentlemen, our next topic is gun control here in Louisiana. Currently, state law does not require background checks for anyone buying a firearm. Meanwhile, federal law dictates that licensed firearm dealers perform background checks on buyers, but does not require checks for private sales. In the wake of recent mass shootings across the country in El Paso, Texas, Dayton, Ohio, Midland, and Odessa, Texas, the question: would you support a state law which would require background checks for all firearm sales? Mr. Abraham, we'll begin with you. Sir, you have 60 seconds.
I've actually read the laws, and those laws are in place for those private sales. Look, we talk about this violence. It's horrific. But we've got to get to the root cause of why we are in this violent society. And until we address that, we can talk about guns, we can talk about knives, we can talk about whatever weapon you want, but that is not addressing the problem. The Second Amendment, I've said, is self-explanatory. And I've defended that at the congressional level, and I will certainly defend it at the state level.
Mr. Abraham, thank you. Mr. Risponi, over to you, sir. You'll have 60 seconds as well. Do you support a state law requiring background checks for all firearm sales?
You know, I'm going to always defend our Second Amendment rights, the rights for citizens to legally own and protect themselves. And that's what I will continue to do. And I'm not going to weaken those laws. They have the right to do that. And I will stand behind that, the Second Amendment.
Mr. Risponi, thank you. Finally, Mr. Edwards, your turn, sir. Are you for or against background checks at the state level for all firearm sales?
As someone who's been hunting all of my life, and I'm a gun owner, I believe in the Second Amendment, and I believe that it confers upon an individual a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. I do not support extending background checks as a matter of law to all sales. I do believe it ought to apply to all commercial sales, however. I further agree with the president that his decision to ban the bump stocks was correct, and I think we need to do more. And we are doing more at the state of Louisiana to more accurately and timely transmit to the federal database information that would identify those individuals who should not be allowed to buy a firearm so that the background's checked by identifying them as individuals who pose a danger to themselves or others, either because of criminal behavior or because they have mental health issues.
Mr. Edwards, thank you. Gentlemen, we do have a follow-up on this topic. You'll each have 30 seconds to respond to this question. We will state some polling data when asked specifically about access to semi-automatic rifles. More than half of the people questioned in our poll this week said they either support limitations on the Second Amendment or were in favor of these rifles being outlawed altogether. Given this information, Mr. Abraham, will begin with you. Does it change how you would approach the issue in any way? You have 30 seconds.
Well, every rifle that we use in hunting is almost all semi-automatic. So there's a vast difference between, I think, what the perception and what the reality is. But it doesn't change my opinion. The Second Amendment is still self-explanatory.
Mr. Abraham, thank you. Mr. Risponi, 30 seconds for you, sir. With more than half of the voter base being in favor of some kind of restrictions in terms of the Second Amendment, does that change your perception on this issue at all?
No, it does not. Most hunting rifles, most rifles are semi-automatic. I'm not going to take that away and restrict that. And I'll go back to what the governor said. We do a better job of doing background checks. We'd be more efficient at that. We have a mental issue problem. We don't have a gun problem here. We're not going to let people take your guns away from you.
Mr. Risponi, thank you. And finally, Mr. Edwards, you have 30 seconds as well to respond, sir.
Yeah, it'll be pretty quick. That poll makes no difference to me. Look, outlaw semi-automatic rifles. Every deer hunter I know uses a semi-automatic rifle to deer hunt. So that poll, I think it was flawed from the beginning. It makes no difference in terms of my opinion that I gave you just a moment ago.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you for your answers. Next, Fred will lead our next topic.
All right, thank you, Chad. Gentlemen, we're going to switch things up a little. You're going to actually hear from an LSU student from the beautiful LSU campus, because our next question is regarding higher education in Louisiana. And so we'll bring in a student from the Manship School of Mass Communication to ask it. Now, in this video, you will hear her ask you to raise your hands. You don't have to raise your hands when she says it, because she can't see you anyway. Okay? So wait till it comes back to me for further instruction. Okay, so gentlemen, please take a look at the monitor on the stage.
Hi, my name is Sarah Procopio, and I'm a political communications junior here at LSU. For many of us here on campus, the funding of the TOPS program has been a major issue for the last several years. Will candidates please raise their hand if they support funding the TOPS program at its current levels?
All right, there you go. To reiterate, if you would keep TOPS funded at its current level, please raise your hand. Okay, well, there we have it.
Or better.
Okay, so we're going to go to Mr. Risponse first. Can you tell me why?
Well, I'd like to thank Sarah for her question because it's very important. These students work very hard to get these top scholarships, and we're going to do everything to protect those top scholarships. We want them, if they do a good job, to be able to go to our community technical colleges and our 4 universities so they can have a career here in Louisiana. What I won't do is make TOPS a political football by threatening the TOPS program if we have a budget situation that we don't really have. But I won't do that. I will not play political football with our kids and our children's future.
All right, thank you, Mr. Risponse. Mr. Edwards, why do you support keeping it funded at its current level?
Well, first of all, it's a commitment that we made to students when they go to high school.
Amen.
If they will take certain courses, get a certain GPA, and get a qualifying score on the ACT, we're going to fund TOPS for them, which covers tuition at our universities and our community and technical colleges. And I believe that we ought to live up to that obligation. It's incredibly important. I think it keeps more of our best and brightest here in Louisiana and beyond. Because if someone goes out of state to go to college, there's a less of a chance that they ever come back to Louisiana. The challenge we had for the 8 years before I became governor, we cut higher education deeper than any other state in the nation, raised tuition more than any other state in the nation, and that raised the cost of the TOPS program. And that was a real challenge for us while we faced that $2 billion budget deficit. But one of the reasons that we needed to fix our budget and make sure we had more stability, get our economy growing, have the revenue necessary, was to meet the obligation that we have to our kids on TOPS. And I'm committed to doing that going forward as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham, why do you support it as it is?
I'm glad the governor said he's going to support it because he's the only governor that actually cut TOPS. Fortunately, the legislature put it back into place. And if we hadn't been for the legislature, we wouldn't be where we are now. And unfortunately, now it's even tiered where it's not as high as it probably should be. The best and the brightest of Louisiana depend on this TOPS scholarship to stay here. Our children, our young people, they are leaving in droves. And if this TOPS project keeps them in Louisiana with that good job waiting, which unfortunately we don't have now, I will fund that 100% every day that I'm your governor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Abraham. We're going to continue down this road with a follow-up question. As governor, how would you deal with the growing rate of Louisiana students using the TOPS program and the growing cost to the state? And Mr. Risponse, we'll go to you first. 30 seconds.
Well, I tell you what, we need to have a constitutional convention and look at all of these things, and education has to be one of them. We have to make sure that we run our education system more effective, and more efficient. And that's one of the things that I'm proposing. I'm the only candidate here that says we have to have a constitutional convention to fix some things and fix our Constitution so we can move forward and come into the 21st century again. We have to do some things different, and that's what I would do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Risponse. Mr. Edwards, you'll have 30 seconds. How would you handle the growing number of students using the program and the increased burden on the Louisiana taxpayers?
First of all, it's a good thing to have more students using the program.
Amen.
You reduce the burden by not raising tuition, which is something I've been focused on as governor. You have to make sure that you're funding higher education with state general fund dollars, which for the first time in 10 years has been a net new investment in higher education this year. You keep tuition low, and then the cost of the program does not grow like it did in the past, and it's certainly affordable, and it's an obligation that we can and that we will continue to meet.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham, what's your plan on handling the increase in students using this program and the increase in state spending on it? You have 30 seconds.
What you're going to find is going to be my answer to a lot of things tonight. Jobs. The more people paying into the tax system, the higher the revenue. We don't have a spending problem, a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We have a leadership problem. Get the jobs in, the revenue comes up. As your next conservative governor with a conservative legislature, that money is there every time we need it.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. For our next line of questions, we'll go to Jackie.
Thank you, Fred. Our next questions have been individually tailored to each candidate. You will each have 60 seconds to respond and then 30 seconds for a follow-up. There will be no rebuttal this round, so we ask that you do not interrupt your fellow candidates because you will not be able to respond. No rebuttals. We're going to begin with Mr. Edwards. In November of 2017, your administration was pulled into the nationwide Me Too movement when one of your top aides resigned amid sexual harassment allegations. Taxpayers spent $85,000 to settle with the woman who accused Johnny Anderson, though he denies any wrongdoing. However, in 2006, when Anderson was chairman of the Southern University Board of Supervisors and assistant chief of staff to late Governor Kathleen Blanco, Anderson faced similar accusations by at least half a dozen Southern University employees, and court records show at least one employee settled with Southern University. Now, given his background in the rigorous vetting process, why was he hired?
Mr. Anderson was hired, Mr. Anderson was hired because the investigations at Southern University actually exonerated him. And I knew Mr. Anderson. I believed he was a good, competent public servant. When the allegations arose while he was working for me, within about half of a day, his service to the state of Louisiana was terminated. There is no place for sexual harassment at all, not in state government, not in private enterprise. And so I made sure that not only did he leave, but that we also did an inventory of all the policies and procedures in effect for the state of Louisiana to ensure that this would not happen again, and that if it does happen, that swift action would take place, much as it did when I learned of Mr. Anderson's, the allegations against Mr. Anderson in November of 2017, I think it was.
Now, personal question, did you reach out to the person who made these allegations, and if so, what did you say to her?
I did not, and she formerly worked at the office as well. I did not reach out to her, but I made sure that she was treated fairly and respectfully by everyone in the governor's office.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. Chad has the next question.
Jackie, thank you. Mr. Abraham, you are up next, sir. Currently in your third term in office representing North Louisiana. However, according to ProPublica, you have missed 44% of your votes on Capitol Hill between the start of your third term and recently as of Tuesday of this week, which is the highest percentage of any person in Congress. Your campaign has said on record that you will occasionally have to miss votes because, quote, beating John Bel Edwards is that important. Now, you announced your candidacy for governor back in December, shortly after you were reelected. The question to you, sir, you'll have 60 seconds. If winning this race in Louisiana is so important, why would you not step aside from that position in Congress to focus solely on this race?
Thank you for the question. My first two terms of Congress, I had one of the highest voting records in Congress, but you've answered the question for me. This race is this important because if we don't turn this state in a different direction, we never come to where we need to be. We know we have potential. We are in constant dialogue with our wonderful Steve Scalise and his office, and we are in constant contact with the constituents of the 5th Congressional District, 3 of whom we've helped today. 2 were veterans and 1 was a farmer that needed some assistance. We are doing the job that we were elected to do. We'll continue to do it. We're going to miss some more votes. We'll be there for some. But this election is so important that I'll be in the state and win this election.
Okay, Mr. Abraham, that being stated, sir, we do have a follow-up. You'll have 30 seconds to answer this. That being stated, your absences on Capitol Hill still have lingering effects. Is it fair to those constituents that you mentioned in your district that you've only represented them 56% of the time on Capitol Hill?
That is not true. We represent those constituents every day. I've got staff in D.C. I've got staff in Louisiana, in every major city of this district. And we are fielding phone calls, we are fielding problems, and we are solving problems every day of the week.
Okay, Mr. Abraham, thank you. Our final individual question will be for Mr. Rispone, and that will come from Fred.
Thank you, Chad. Mr. Rispone, you'll have 60 seconds to reply to this. Your own words describe you as a conservative outsider, someone who can shake up the status quo. But let's take a look at this. More than 2 decades of campaign donation history shows you've contributed nearly $1 million to federal campaigns alone, including more than $160,000 to President Trump's campaign back in 2016. Does your donation history contradict you calling yourself a political outsider?
When I say a political outsider, I'm talking about someone who's never run for office before, someone who's not a career politician. And I'm a good citizen. I've always tried to support good candidates that would do the right thing and move our state and our country forward. I'm not a taker. I'm a giver. I take the responsibility of this state and this country, that if you only sit on the sidelines and expect someone else to help elect good people, you're not doing your job. You're not appreciating what God has given you and what the future of your children and grandchildren is. That's what I'm doing today. The only reason I'm running, it's not an ego trip. It's because I want this state to be great again. I want our jobs to come back. I'm a job creator. There's no reason why Louisiana is not #1 in the South when it comes to jobs and opportunities for our children. So our children and our grandchildren will stay here and be proud to be part of Louisiana in the future. That's why I'm running.
Thank you, Mr. Rispone. I'll just remind the audience, let's please keep the applause down. So I have a follow-up. You are well known and seemingly proud of your many business ventures in the state, some of which do get funding from the government. So if elected, how do you plan to separate your administration from your business interests?
Well, I'll put everything I have will be in a double-blind trust, and I won't be engaged with that. That's a simple process that most people like myself do. So I have nothing to do with it, no decisions. And by the way, I've never done any government projects, never done any government work. All of our work has been private work.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rispone. Now, for the next question, we'll go to Jackie.
Thank you very much, Fred. Now, gentlemen, Louisiana has joined a legal battle with other states over abortion legislation, which does not include exceptions for rape or incest. Mr. Abraham, we'll begin with you. Pending the court's decision, would you support potential exceptions in any revisit of this legislation? 60 seconds.
As a physician, I believe life begins at conception. I've seen the ultrasounds and I've held the hands of the mothers as we've looked at them together. A life is a life, and that decision will be between that mother, that father, and that physician.
So the question is, would you support exceptions for rape or incest?
No.
No exceptions. Okay, thank you. Mr. Rispone, would you support exceptions for rape or incest?
I think we just signed a good law in place recently, and I thank the governor for doing that and stepping up to protect the innocent lives. Okay. And I would not support anything changing that law.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards?
Look, there are people on both sides of this issue, obviously, who have deeply held positions, and I understand that. I respect that. However, I am pro-life, and that is something that's been clear and consistent from the very beginning. It is informed by my Catholic Christian faith. And having said that, I do want to tell you that I am pro-life, not just pro-birth. That means we need to do more for the vulnerable in our society, especially our children. It means that we need to make sure we have a good foster care program, for example, that we're promoting adoptions out of, extending to 21, make sure that we're attacking maternal mortality issues in the state of Louisiana. And yes, the Medicaid expansion is a pro-life position as well. There are people alive in Louisiana today because we expanded Medicaid who otherwise would not be.
Would you support exceptions for rape or incest?
Look, I signed the bill into law as it was when it hit my desk. And the only way that I would see the state of Louisiana doing something different is if it was ordered on us by courts, not because of any action that we would take as a state.
personally do you support exceptions for rape or incest?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, personally, do you support exceptions for rape or incest?
No, I signed a bill that I support.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, we conducted a poll, and according to our poll results, nearly 40% of Louisiana voters are actually in favor of rape and incest exceptions, even if they identify as pro-life. Given these results, does this influence your decision to support exceptions in future legislation? We'll begin with you, Mr. Abraham. You have 30 seconds.
If you believe life begins at conception, it's a life. And I go back. Look, that's a traumatic, terrible time of someone's life. But that's a decision that they should make between the mother, the father, and hopefully input from their physician.
So the poll does not change your mind about the exceptions?
It doesn't.
Thank you. Mr. Risponi, does the poll change your mind about exceptions?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't change my mind, but my heart goes out to anyone that has to go through that. The whole family, that individual, that's got to be traumatic. And what I would hope that they would look to the future of that child, that unborn child. We have a great demand that people are looking for children, and we could do something about that through adoptions and move along with that, but protect that child's life.
All right, and Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, the answer is no. The poll doesn't change anything about my beliefs and what I would do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Chad.
All right, Jackie, thank you very much. Gentlemen, time now to bring in another fantastic student from the LSU Manship School of Mass Communication to ask our next question about state infrastructure. Please take a look at the monitor right in front of you.
Hi, my name is Justin Franklin, and I'm a junior here at LSU studying political communication. Many of my friends and classmates deal with the struggle of commuting to LSU on the state's often clogged highway systems. The state has a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure backlog, and the gas tax has not been raised in nearly 3 decades. As governor, will you support legislation to raise the state's gas tax in order to help eliminate this backlog?
Thank you, Justin. Mr. Risponi, we will start with you, sir. 60 seconds. Do you favor or oppose raising the state's gas tax to help cut down on this infrastructure backlog?
You know, our problem is we have politicians that have been heading this up for years and years and kicking the can down the road. We know our roads and bridges are in terrible shape, and something has to be done about it. We need a business person to go in there and prioritize where are we spending the hard-to-earn tax dollars. We tell the citizens, you give us your tax dollars, and we spend it on things that are not roads and bridges. First of all, we got to go back and spend that money where we promised we were going to do it. Before we go out and ask them for more money, politicians they don't fix the problem, they just keep asking for more and more money. Build the confidence in our citizens. Tell them we're going to spend your money where we told you you're going to spend it, improve the roads and bridges, do what we say we're going to do. That's why we need a business person, not a bunch of politicians going down there always asking for more money. Any problem they run into, we just need more money, we'll fix it. That won't happen in my administration. We're going to put the money back in the roads and bridges where it belongs and build the confidence back in our citizens.
All right, Mr. Risponi, thank you. Mr. Edwards, you're up next, sir. 60 seconds. In favor or opposed to raising the state's gas tax to help cut down on this backlog?
You know, in the first year that I was governor, I did make sure that transportation trust fund dollars at the state level were only spent on transportation funding. And by the way, that has directed $300 million more to transportation than would have otherwise been the case. And that's how we were able to double our port priority program. So we're doing those things. At the end of the day, I support a task force recommendation that came out in 2017 that did an exhaustive study of our system, the revenue that was available. But I know that this is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. The simple fact of the matter is the gas tax was 16 cents 30 years ago. It's 16 cents today. And nobody can do this today with the same money that they had 30 years ago. Now, we're going to have to work with the legislative leadership when it comes in and all the individual legislators, but we're going to have to move forward on this issue. And we cannot pretend that with the resources that we have, that we're going to be able to tackle in a meaningful way that $14 billion backlog, although we are doing much better.
Quick follow-up for you, sir. Do you believe it's likely that the gas tax will be increased here in Louisiana in the future?
Yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult to do. I will tell you, I've had lots of conversations with individual members of the legislature, House and Senate, Republican and Democrat, but we're going to continue to be aggressive and creative in funding. For example, I-10 here, we're going to widen it using Garvey bonds, something that we've never done before in the state of Louisiana until I became governor. We're going to make sure that we move forward with the $700 million injection of infrastructure investment that I signed into law this year that won't cost taxpayers anything, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham, the same question to you, sir. Mr. Abraham, thank you, audience. Mr. Abraham, you have 30 seconds. Are you in favor or opposed to raising the state's gas tax to help cut down on Louisiana's infrastructure issues?
The governor raised up Garvey bonds. That's paying robbing Peter to pay Paul. You know that, Governor. Look, it's raining outside. It's going to flood here in Baton Rouge, so we do have a crisis in this infrastructure. The DOT is out of control. We need to reform it. We need to prioritize, and we need to get it more efficient. Now, I'm also a pragmatist, and if a gas tax has to be passed by the legislature, as your governor, I will guarantee the taxpayers it will be tax neutral. We have too many taxes. It's on the burden of our taxpayers, and if we have one tax up, there's going to be one tax down.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. We'll stay on this topic a few more minutes. We have a follow-up question referencing another poll result, if you'd like to take a look at your monitor, showing that nearly half of voters in Louisiana within this poll, 47%, are in favor of raising the gas tax if that money would be dedicated to maintaining or building new infrastructure. With this growing trend, which may be shifting from the voting populace, their stance on the issue evolving. Mr. Risponse, we'll begin with you. 30 seconds. Would this change your stance at all, that the voters are saying they would be willing to help fund the process?
Well, it's actually confirmed my stance. My stance is we should be spending the money that we told them should be going in roads and bridges. We're spending $130 million of our gas tax today on bureaucrats, jobs, and benefits, not on roads and bridges. We're going to have to do better than that. When the governor was running in 2015, he said he was going to fix those things. He said he was going to get the capital outlay and assign certain dollars to it every year to go to our roads and bridges and get it matched. You know, that hasn't happened. We have not done what we said we were going to do to start with.
Thank you, Mr. Risponse. Mr. Edwards, you have 30 seconds as well. Your reaction to the polling results.
Well, the poll doesn't change my opinion that I stated earlier, but I will tell you a higher percentage of the capital outlay has gone to road and bridge construction than at any time in the recent past. Secondly, the Garvey bonds are absolutely essential if we're going to deliver capacity
Mr.
projects
Abraham, you'll
that
have
are
your
very,
chance.
very expensive, because otherwise you're not going to have the funds with which to do it. Whether it's widening I-10 here, the interchange at Kenner for the new billion-dollar airport, or the Barksdale interchange, we would not have done those projects but for the use of Garvey bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. And now, Mr. Abraham, you do have 30 seconds to respond as well.
Yes, more taxes, taxes, taxes from this governor. It doesn't change my opinion. I've said that if we have a gas tax that comes from the legislature and it needs to be signed, we'll do it. But there's going to be a tax that's going to be taken away, and that's not hard to do in this environment because we are overtaxed to the wazoo. So if it's tax neutral, we'll keep all options on the table.
Mr. Abraham, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Our next topic will be led by Fred.
Thank you, Chad. As Louisiana has rolled out Medicaid expansion, there have been reports of problems with fraud and abuse, and most recently, issues with the awarding of multi-billion-dollar contracts to help run that program. Mr. Edwards, it was your administration who rolled out this expansion. So the question to you is, and you have 60 seconds, do you stand by your team's work, and would you make any changes?
Absolutely. The easiest big decision I will ever make as governor was to expand Medicaid. We have 450,000 working Louisianans with health insurance who never had it before. We have the lowest percentage of people uninsured in our state's history, less than half of what it was when I became governor, and we're actually ahead of the national average today. We know that it helped us address the $2 billion budget deficit because we've saved $317 million just in the first 2 years on the Medicaid expansion, but most importantly, it is saving people's lives. People like Cindy, who is here tonight, a cancer survivor from Monroe, who needed that coverage in order to access the care, to get well, in order to return to work and not have to worry about going bankrupt trying to pay her medical bills. So it's the easiest big decision. And by the way, I am 100% committed to program integrity as well, which is why Louisiana is one of 8 states recognized by the Trump administration as implementing best practices to cut out fraud, waste, and abuse.
All right, thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham, has Medicaid expansion been handled properly?
Look, I'm a family doctor. He's a trial lawyer. Under his administration, this Medicaid expansion rollout has been a nightmare. You've got over 1,600 people making over $100,000 a year on the rolls. There is waste, fraud, and abuse. But let me tell you, this is a second-rate insurance for a first-rate class of people like Cindy. I will get it right. I will fix this program, and the way we have to do it is get those people that are ineligible off the rolls so that those people that are on the rolls get the care they need. I can't get a patient to a specialist when I need them. I can't give them the drug that I need as a physician. We need to do much better, and I will. And the other thing is that this governor just eliminated one of our MCOs because they gave money to a Republican candidate, put 500,000 patients into a chaotic situation, and now this is where we are.
Mr. Abraham, those were some...
No, Governor.
Are you going to give me 30 seconds
yes, I'm going to give
to that?
Governor, no.
If I could get the audience to stop. Audience, I know you're loving this, and I love that you love it, but let's be fair to these candidates. Mr. Edwards, you have 30 seconds to respond to that.
That is a ridiculous and false statement. The MCO that you're talking about gives generously to both sides.
Mostly to Republican, Governor.
No, sir.
Abraham.
And I had nothing to do with that procurement. And the communication about the procurement decision to not retain that incumbent MCO, that decision was made and the communication was made long before anybody had any idea about giving.
That's a lie,
You are
Governor.
just 100% false.
That's a lie.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. We're going to get Mr. Risponse in on this, give him a chance to respond to this as well. Mr. Risponse, you have 30 seconds.
It's fun to watch two politicians go after each other. I'm just a business person.
So I'll repeat the question for you, Mr. Risponse. Has Medicaid expansion been handled properly, and what changes would you make if you were elected governor? You have 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, we need to protect the ones that need it the most. They need health care. So we have to do that. But the thing is that what we have today is unsustainable. If we don't do something different, it's going to go broke. And then we won't be able to take care of the people who need it the most. So first of all, we have to do that. We do have to get rid of the apples, the ones that are abusing it, the waste. So we would have it sustainable. But my goal as a businessman is to get jobs here so people can afford good wages and benefits. So we don't need to be on government assistance. That's a whole different approach.
All right. Mr. Risponse, thank you. I have a follow-up question. You'll have 30 seconds to reply to this. Are you in favor or opposed to work requirements for anyone who is enrolled in Medicaid? And Mr. Edwards, you'll start us off again. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I supported community engagement for everyone on Medicaid. We worked with Representative Frank Hoffman from Monroe on a bill. We supported it. It did not make it out of the House of Representatives. We then went to the Monroe area and created a pilot program, in fact. But I will tell you, I also support work requirements for members of Congress, and this gentleman right here does not work in Congress. He's missed more days than any of the other 434 members of Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Abraham, I'll give you a chance to respond. Obviously, the question is, are you in favor or opposed to the work requirements for anyone who is enrolled in Medicare?
Governor, I'll go back and tell the audience to look at your record when you were running for governor, too, when you were in the legislature.
I never missed a day. Not a single day. Not a single day. Go look.
I will. I have.
I doubt that. There's no way.
The work requirements, and it's a law, Governor.
Not a day.
I'll restate the question. Are you in favor or opposed to work requirements for anyone enrolled in Medicaid?
If you're over 18, you don't have dependent children, don't have a disability, certainly if you're not pregnant, then yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. For our next question, we'll go to Jackie.
Do I get to answer that one about work requirements?
I'm sorry, Mr. Risponse. I apologize.
You're having too much fun watching these two politicians.
They are a little distracting. I'm sorry. Yes, how do you feel about...
That's okay. I'll keep you straight. I'm a businessman, okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that. You have 30 seconds.
I'm a job creator. I believe in work requirements, but I also believe in helping them get a better job. You know, I wouldn't be bragging about putting 500,000 more people on Medicaid. I'd be bragging about getting them off of Medicaid with better jobs and better wages. And that's what I would do. Work with them, help them, give them better skills, better education. You got to have a work requirement, folks. Otherwise, they don't have the incentive. Work with them. They want a job. They don't want to be on Medicaid. They don't want us to be helping them all the time. Let's help them get a better job where they can have wages and benefits and have pride in what they do. That's what I'll be doing.
Thank you, Mr. Rispone. Now, for the next line of questions, we'll go to Jackie.
Thank you, Fred. Now, all three of you have made flattering remarks about President Donald Trump. And in one way or the other, you all tout a close relationship with him. As governor, how would you use that relationship to benefit the citizens of Louisiana? We're going to go with you first. Mr. Abraham, you'll have 60 seconds.
Well, I think I'm the only one on the stage that's actually voted with President Trump on many occasions while I was doing my job, Governor. So, yes, this president has had an economy with legislation that I voted for, the Jobs Act and tax cut bills, that has allowed the national economy to soar. But guess what? It hasn't come down to Louisiana because of our taxes, because of our trial lawyer climate that sues everybody that moves, and we've got to stop that. So, yes, I will continue to work with this great president. I have, and I will.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rispone, how would you use your relationship with Mr.
See,
Trump?
I'm the only one on this stage that's always supported President Trump, always. Even when he was a candidate running against Hillary Clinton. I didn't ask him to step aside. I can't imagine, I'm so grateful that he didn't take the advice of Mr. Abraham and step aside when he could have ran against Hillary Clinton. But what I want to tell you is that I'll work with the president. The president has done the United States a great favor. He has shown them what happens when you hire an outsider, a conservative, someone with serious business skills, someone that's not beholden to special interests, someone that's not a politician. He has turned this country around for us. The strongest economy, the lowest unemployment since 1969. We are doing great. It takes someone from the outside. We have enough with the career politicians. It's time to do something different in Louisiana as well. I'm going to work with this president because I'm like that president. I'm an outsider. I'm a businessman. I'm not beholden to special interests. I know how to create jobs and work with job creators, and that's what I'll do for Louisiana.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Edwards, how have you used your relationship and how would you continue to use your relationship to help the state? 60 seconds.
First of all, I said when I ran for governor, I was going to put Louisiana first, and I would be a Louisianan ahead of a member of my party. I think it's important to have a great working relationship with the president, no matter who or she might be or what party they come from. That's what I did under President Obama in the first year. That's what I've done in the last 3 years under President Trump. I've actually met with the president on 9 different occasions to discuss very important things like transportation infrastructure, the opioid epidemic, and criminal justice reform, where I met with him for 2 hours explaining what we had done in Louisiana, left him with all the information, and he ultimately signed the First Step Act, which mirrors in every significant manner what we had done in Louisiana. I think to best serve the people of Louisiana, especially when you know you're going to have more than your fair share of natural disaster and need help, that you need to have a good working relationship with the president and with his cabinet and with members of Congress. And I have done that throughout my 4 years as governor over 2 different presidents.
All right. Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Chad.
All right, Jackie, thank you. Gentlemen, we have to skip ahead a bit. We are running short on time. We're going to go ahead and move straight to closing statements. You will each have 30 seconds, and based on the result of our random card drawing from earlier this week, Mr. Rispone, you will go first for your closing statement. You have 30 seconds, sir.
First of all, thank you for having us here. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to share our thoughts and what we think about Louisiana. But let me say this. This is like a job interview. It's time to we have 2 career politicians, and you have an outsider, a conservative, a job creator. Look at it that way. What we need, our state has the slowest economy in the country. We are the only state losing jobs in Louisiana. We need someone that knows how to create jobs so our children and our grandchildren will have an opportunity to stay here and call Louisiana home. And that's why I'm running. I need your prayers, I need your support, and I need your vote.
Thank
and
you,
I
Mr.
thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Rispone. Mr. Edwards, thank you, everybody. Mr. Edwards, you are up next, sir. You have 30 seconds for a closing statement.
When I walked into office, I found a $2 billion budget deficit, the largest in the history of our state, left to me by Bobby Jindal. Working hard in a bipartisan fashion, we've turned that into surpluses. We are making sure that we're making investments in education. Again, the first teacher pay raise in 10 years. all of it bipartisan, all of it by putting Louisiana ahead of party. And if we will just refuse to become Washington, D.C., I know that our best days are ahead of us. We've come too far. We are not turning back now. I'm asking for prayers for the state, votes for me, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Thank you very much. And finally, Mr. Abraham. Mr. Abraham, you also have 30 seconds for your closing statement. 30 seconds, sir.
Well, you just heard this governor again, blame, blame, blame. Let's imagine a different Louisiana, a Louisiana where our children are safe. Imagine a Louisiana where our children don't have to leave. Imagine a Louisiana where we have those good, high-paying jobs. When I'm your governor, it won't be a dream, it'll be reality. So I ask for your vote, I ask for your prayers, and I ask for your great support moving forward. God bless Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Abraham. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Jackie?
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to ask the audience to give you one more round of applause because they seem to enjoy that. All right, audience, thank you very much. I think they feel the love. We would like to say thank you to the candidates. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your answering our questions. I think that you've certainly given the voters some important insight as they head to the polls. We look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail heading up to the October 12th election. Thank you very much, and that will do it for our debate here live from the campus of LSU. Have a great night.